Well, let's go ahead and get this started. Welcome. Just a quick sound check. Make sure that your audio is coming through. If you have questions, go ahead and put them in the chat window here. We'll be glad to address them. We're really looking forward to interacting with all of you here online. Let me go ahead and give our radio introduction and we'll get started. Welcome to Integrate Online, presented by the West Virginia University Reed College of Media, which offers renowned online master's degree programs in marketing communications. Thank you for joining us. Today, we'll be discussing the secret sauce of marketing career success, change management, with Colby Renton, myself, and Dr. Debbie Qaqish. We're all from the PEDOWITZ group. Please be sure to keep your mics muted for the session and send questions in the chat feature. Dr. Debbie, over to you.
Thank you so much, Paul. I appreciate that introduction and kind of getting us going. When we were first asked to talk to you guys about change management, we were thrilled. I mean, this is what we do, practically speaking, every single day for our customers. And our customers are large marketing organizations, and I know that many of you are in the marketing track. And I think we even have some professionals on board. But being able to manage change and to understand change and not have it happen to you is absolutely critical for your success as a marketer. I think even 4 or 5 years ago, change was not as important as it is today, but it truly is a career maker or breaker for you. How you manage change, how you adopt change, and how you lead change. So we were absolutely thrilled to be part of this session for you guys today. Let's begin with introductions. Let me introduce the crew, the folks that are going to be talking to you about change, both at a personal level and also at a professional level as a marketer. And we'll start with Colby. Colby, tell everybody a little bit about your background.
Thanks, Debbie. Yes, my name is Colby Renton, as Deb mentioned, and I'm one of our vice presidents of customer experience and digital transformation here at PEDOWITZ Group, and have been consulting for about 8 years, but with PEDOWITZ. But prior to that, was a marketer and in the trenches myself, driving an organizational change when we started to adopt technology. I built the plan for it and then lived through it as a marketer. So. It gave me particular insights that I'm able to leverage as a consultant. And I worked at the time, I was working in a company that is an HR consulting firm that covers leadership development and succession planning. And we taught courses on organizational change and driving change, and had gone through several of those courses and leveraged those courses as a part of what I had done internally with the company. And then actually, I was a client of the PEDOWITZ group, brought them in to help me influence other leaders my way into what I wanted to have happen at the company, and then decided to flip sides. So I've been doing it on this side and helping my clients drive digital transformation for the last 8 years here. So overall, been in marketing for about 20 years and have been passionate about this topic from the very first course I took at DDI in, gosh, I don't know, somewhere in the mid-90s. So I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Thanks, Colby. Paul?
Yeah, my name is Paul Johnson, and I just recently joined the PEDOWITZ group this year after a career of 17 years at Microsoft Corporation. And at Microsoft, I was responsible for large-scale initiatives that involved thousands of employees. I'm introducing and driving adoption of new marketing processes, new technology, and even new modern marketing skills that changed the way we engaged with customers. And as I said, these changes impacted thousands of people. And it was all during a time of just huge transformation at Microsoft. To give you an idea of the scale, when I joined in 2002, Microsoft was ranked number 72 on the Fortune 500 list in terms of total market capitalization. And this year was ranked number 1. So I've seen a lot of change. I have participated in a lot of change. I've driven a lot of change. And today at the PEDOWITZ Group, I help companies all over the globe change the way they do marketing and engage with customers.
Thanks, Paul. And again, I'm Dr. Debbie Qaqish. I am one of the partners at the PEDOWITZ Group. And I'm a vocal, highly, relentlessly motivated agent of change. If I walk into a room, it is all about change. And it's so funny. I have a new book coming out in August. It's called From the Back Room to the Boardroom, and How Marketing Earns Their Seat at the Table. A lot of that book really has to do with change. So we're, again, just so very, very pleased to be with you guys today. So this is going to be practical, and it's also going to be personal. And what I mean by that is, clearly our topic is change and why you need to think about change and how you need to think about change if you're looking as a professional career marketer. But we also want to give you some personal areas to think about as well, because we realize that many of you are still in school. And so just so I can get a sense, you guys do me a favor, go to chat. And if you are a professional and already out of school, just go into the chat and just let me know. Just say professional. I'd like to see how many people in our audience today are professionals versus how many folks are actually in school. That'll be helpful. Okay. Oh, wow. We have quite a few professionals today, which is just excellent. And there may be times when I call on you perhaps to share some of your stories and some of your anecdotes for what you've seen in change for our college students who are in here with us as well. So very much thank you for that. And I want to begin to talk about change. And the very first thing I want to say is change is hard. Change is not often fun. Of course, unless you're the one that's leading it, then you think it's, well, this is just fantastic. But what you have to think about change and what you need to know about change is it is hard and it is incredibly important. And I'll give you an example. So how many of you made a New Year's resolution in January of this year? Just put yes in the chat. If you made a New Year's resolution, just put yes in the chat. So we've got about 36 participants, and I'm going to expect to see probably about 35 of you saying yes to that. And thank you, Mark. Thank you, Tracy. Thank you, Lindsay. Thank you, Alexis. Thank you, Chad. So you guys know a lot of times when we make New Year's resolutions, it's because we feel compelled to change something important in our life. A lot of times it's around health. I'm going to eat better. I'm going to exercise more. It could be I'm going to write more thank you notes. But a lot of times these changes that we make New Year's resolutions around are all about doing something that makes us better. So they're pretty important changes. So I'll ask the follow-up question. How many people kept your New Year's resolutions? If you kept your New Year's resolution, thank you. Tracy's like, nope, it wasn't me. Paul Johnson's not so much. Oh my goodness. We got a Nicole, congrats. Yes, I kept it. Yes, somewhat, partially, so far, so good. But we just use that as a tiny example to say, even when we know change is incredibly good for us, it's still incredibly difficult to do. So what Paul, Colby, and I are going to do in the next 50 minutes is we're going to give you a framework for thinking about change. And then we're going to take you through and have you consider examples that are both personal and also examples that you can take into your professional life as a marketer. So with that, let's go into our next set of slides, Paul. And thank you for your honesty on your New Year's resolutions, okay? I did not keep mine. So, you know, a lot of times when we talk to marketers, we go in and we use a big word like transformation. And that's a lot to take in. So we like to start simply. And so when we talk about change, especially when we talk about how technology has changed what we do and who we are as marketers, we begin by taking a look at how technology has affected us personally. And I have to be very careful when I do this next series of slides because I had to take some out because the people I speak to are getting younger and younger and some of these things aren't even relevant for you. But let's take a look at how technology has changed your behavior. Okay, If any of you remember going to the store and actually buying a CD, I used to buy, you know, LPs, but CDs, and now whatever you want, you know, you just stream it online. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter. My friends always, my mother and her sisters tell me, oh, you have the best playlist. It's because I've got Spotify. You know, how easy is that? Let's go to the next one, Paul. Another great example is of how technology has changed behavior, especially if you travel for business. The last thing you ever want to do is get in the back of a taxi. They're nasty, dirty, filthy. I don't care what city that you're in, right? And how wonderful that you can now call on, oh no, you're laughing, Colby, that you could call Uber. I was in San Francisco a few years ago, and we were at a big conference. I think it must have been Dreamforce, which is the big Salesforce conference. And somebody said, let's get a cab. And one guy said, oh no, we can get an Uber. And he takes out his phone and he's looking, oh my gosh, that is the coolest thing. You see him coming and then they know you and you know them. So it was very cool. So, you know, it changes our behavior and how we get transportation from city to city. A lot of times now at the PEDOWITZ group, we don't even rent cars. We just Uber or Lyft everywhere that we need to go because it's so much more cost effective. Let's go to the next one, Paul. So if anybody has any of these dash buttons from Amazon, you know, instead of going to the grocery store, which we certainly didn't want to do during the pandemic, and having to spend our time, you know, going through up and down grocery aisles, if you're running out of Tide, you just press that button that is on top of your washing machine and it's at your door the next day. So it's all about how technology has changed our behavior. Let's go to the next one, Paul. All of you, I'm sure, have done this. You know, why stand in line at Starbucks or any of your favorite fast food places? You know, you just place that little order online, you zoom in and you zoom out. The next one, Paul. There you go. And again, if you're a professional, you already know this, but being able to e-sign contracts, wow, the time savings, the aggravation factor, I mean, billions and billions of dollars are now signed with online signatures. That was a great day. One more, Paul. Oh, well, he doesn't have my favorite last one. My favorite last one is telling Alexa, here's my shopping list, and then having Instacart deliver those groceries to your house. Talk about behavior change. So those are just some examples. If you think about your personal life and you think about how technology has changed your behavior because we can now do things differently. So that's going to be the baseline. And we use that story to inform you to think about change personally, but also to think about change and the impact that technology has also made on marketing. So we wanted to go, again, we'll be going back and forth between the professional and the personal, but Paul is going to talk to you now about, you know, are you a change agent or are you a change resistor? So take it away, Paul.
Yep. And Debbie, those examples you gave are all examples where it started with one person who saw that there was an opportunity to change and to think and reimagine how it could be. And so in life, there really is only two choices in your personal life or in your professional life. You can either be a change agent where you understand change, you're looking for change, you're identifying opportunities to change, or you can be satisfied with the status quo. And we refer to that person as a change resistor. Usually a change resistor, you know, it's not a bad thing necessarily, but it's someone who's satisfied with the way things are and thinks that the way things are will last maybe forever. But the thing is, we often as change resistors underestimate the speed with which that change is going to arrive. And you can catch yourself being flat-footed or being sucked out down the hourglass with the rest of the sand. And I love this quote: if you don't like change, you're going to like irrelevance even less. And we see that with examples of companies all the time. If they're not keeping up with the change and not pushing for change, they're risking becoming irrelevant. And so what Debbie asked me to do is to provide you with a framework on how we at the PEDOWITZ group help our clients understand change. And it applies in our personal lives as well as in our professional lives, because change, whether it's personal or at a company, is all about individuals changing. And individuals in mass result in a company or team or organization changing. So I'm going to give you the Change Agent Toolkit. I'm going to walk you through each of these, and there's 5 tools in the toolkit. The first tool answers the question, what is this change and why is it necessary? And the tool there is information, the right information that explains why the change is necessary. And to just give you a quick example, for me, I've been sitting on my butt a lot during COVID-19 at my desk working, and I haven't been taking breaks. And, you know, I was reading more and more online about the need for, you know, exercise, movement, so you can avoid, you know, all sorts of bad things. And in fact, I read the American Heart Association recommended that I exercise my heart for at least 20 minutes a day. And that information was the starting point for me to be aware that there was more that I could do. The second tool in the toolkit answers the question, what's in it for me? Why should I change? Or in a company, what's in it for my company? What's in it for my organization? And that tool is motivation. So after I have the information that change is necessary, how do I motivate myself or motivate others to change? And I do that by explaining what's in it for me or what's in it for you. For example, I noticed that my jeans were not fitting as loosely as they normally do. And I realized I did not want to go clothes shopping during the pandemic. So that was my motivation to get up and start running. And that was my COVID-19 resolution. The third tool in your toolkit as a change agent is answers the question, how do I change? How do I do it? What are the skills I need to make this change? What's the knowledge I need? So we call that tool education. So if you're a change agent in your company and you're driving change, it's your responsibility to educate, to inform people on how they can change. They may be willing, they may be motivated, but they need to understand how. And that's such a key. Yeah.
Well, I like your question. Are you a change agent? So let's just take a moment and tell us if you feel like you are a change agent in your company. So if you feel like you are a change agent in your company, just put yes in the chat window and let's see how many change agents we have here.
That is a great question.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Mel. Thank you, Nicole. Great, Mark. Oh, we have some, I would like to be, absolutely. Yes, you do have to be a change agent in the sports industry, especially today. Okay, Patrick, thank you. Amy, okay. All right, so we have some folks who are already change agents. So I just wanted to, since you mentioned that, Paul, I just wanted to stop and do a quick check.
Yeah, and I wish we could sit down with each of you and find out whether these tools in your toolkit resonate with you. The fourth tool is around answering the question, what's blocking me from changing? So you think about it, if you're in your company and you're trying to get your team to change and do something better, you've provided information on why it's necessary. You've got a compelling reason what's in it for me or what's in it for our company. And they have the knowledge and the training necessary to make that change. But there might still be something that's blocking you. For me in my running, it was finding the time to get out on the trail. And so for me, this tool really resonates. It's adaptation, or how do you adapt yourself and others? What adaptation is needed in order to remove blockers? It might be finding time. It might be really just giving people confidence to change. It's all about tweaking things to make that change effective. And the last tool answers the question, is this change worth it? And that's just ongoing sustaining and reinforcing. You may have people starting to do something, but if they don't feel it's worth it, they're going to slide back into the old way of doing things. And so we call that tool compensation. It's the ROI, the return on your investment. And it's revisiting all of these things around information, motivation to be able to propel and sustain that change. And so Debbie and Colby, I'd like to use this as our framework for how we discuss change for the rest of the conversation.
And before we do that, I just want to let everybody know that this is not, there's not a whole lot of words on the screen, but this is a model, this is a framework that is supported by research. So this is not just something, you know, we kind of just made up on the spur of a moment. This change agent toolkit is based on research that is both academic and professional. And so to Paul's point, we're going to bring you guys the practical aspects of this change model today. And I'm going to start with Colby. You know, Colby is one of our vice presidents, and she is also one of our very, very best senior strategists. And Colby actually works with some really large companies. And I don't know whether she just got asking me about change tattooed on her forehead, but she always seems to be in those situations. So why don't you, Colby, begin by, giving us a few thoughts on this model, and then maybe an example of a company that you've worked with.
Yeah, absolutely, Debbie. So it's interesting, as Paul was talking, I'm processing ideas like my clients and customers that I've worked with, and even my own personal experience prior to flipping over to the consulting side of the world, and thinking about, why is this change necessary? So from a practical, for the professionals out there, most businesses, and I think COVID is a really easy example to use, overnight businesses had to change. We had a client who had everybody as a working in the office environment, and they all had desktops, and they had to go out and buy 10,000 laptops overnight. And it just had to be done, and everybody became virtual. We all have recently experienced this as professionals, although we're a virtual company and always have been, but many people are not like that. And so adapting to that change. So sometimes change is necessary because the environment tells us it is. Granted, this pandemic is unusual. It's the first one in my lifetime that's forced us to adapt to a new environment. So the motivation and the motivational element of it wasn't really an option. It was more of this is what you have to do. You don't have a choice. Your office just got shut down, but you did have to educate yourself and learn and adjust. And how do I adapt to that? And how do I, for those of us that have kids, how do you manage your children who are now at home and really figure out how to work around that environment? So educating yourself and then trying to educate your kids at the same time in their own changing environment. So that was big. But again, it was forced adaptation. We had to. That's not always the case. And so I use very often an example of a client that I've been working with for several years. They're would be the equivalent of Verizon in the United States, but they're in Australia, and they have 85% market share. So not like Verizon in that sense. But they are a massive multi-billion-dollar industry and business in telecom, and they have both the consumer side and business-to-business side, so B2C, B2B. But what we're seeing is an increasing shift in B2E, more away from having that mindset of just being B2B or just being B2C, but really, this way we communicate now has to be B2E. And
Colby, why don't you give them the definition of B2B, B2C, and B2E?
Yeah, so that, a lot of our clients are business to business customers where they're selling directly to other businesses, and then they're selling to consumers, or even in some cases, other businesses. Of course, direct business to consumer, that would be, like an Amazon is direct business to consumer, but they also have a whole other arm of their business that sells to business to business. Microsoft, another perfect example. They have business to business where they're selling, the Microsoft Office suite, but then they have a whole other group that my son, if you can hear him upstairs on his Xbox, is direct to the consumer. So business to consumer there. But and they market specifically to the business to consumer versus the business to business. And they address business needs, pains, and challenges when they're going after a B2B market, where they're going after a B2C market, they're, generally addressing the specific want and desire and don't you want this too kind of mentality, versus in B2B, we tend to use more of a fear and uncertainty and doubt, or what we call FUD approach to marketing, because we're trying to get businesses to shift the way that they're doing things. And so the what's in it for me often leads the business to business and gets them off the dime. So I use the example of my client in Australia, and they're really interesting in that what happened was several years ago, although they have 85% market share, their motivation that our catalyst for change was that they recognized that they were dropping from 85 to 84.5 to 83. And it was a slow, but when you're a multi-billion-dollar company, that's a significant chunk. And they're losing it to small independent providers in different spaces across the business, on the B2C side and the B2B side. And so it was we don't want this slide to continue. We've recognized the slide over multiple quarters and we can't have this slide. So what they did at a top-down level was the CEO said, we have to create a digital transformation effort across the business, from sales to services to marketing. Everyone has to adopt this. And they named the project, as companies often do when they're top-down driven initiatives. They name it and they call it something, and then they say, this is how we're going to do it. And each group is expected to do something, whether it's marketing or services or sales or whomever has to adjust. And what are they going to do? And so that's where we step in and then look deeply at, okay, what has to change in order for you to be this vision? And the vision was set clear by the CEO. His vision was to become a digitally transformed business, to streamline efficiencies, to better communicate with their customers, and to better engage their customers, to make sure that they're getting the renewals and that they're not losing customers. And so what they were, to shrink that decline that they were seeing. And so everybody had to play a part. There was no option for that. It was just, we all have to be a part of it. So we started working in the marketing group specifically, but then we ended up in IT, and now we work in multiple different groups because they all had to adapt to what this was. So the necessity, why it was necessary, was that market change. What's in it for me, or the motivation, quite frankly, was for them, if they continue to lose market share, they lose revenue. And in a large enterprise organization, you start to lose revenue over time. That means that ultimately there are going to be headcount reductions, and nobody wants reductions. And nobody wants to feel that. And so
are they publicly traded?
They are.
They are. Okay.
Yep. So the motivation there for the individual is, what's in it for me? If I don't make this change, I could be on the chopping block, quite literally. And as a business, the motivation is, if we don't make a change, these small independents are going to keep nipping away at our market share and our profits and our part of the business. And we don't want that. So the motivation is twofold in business. And it's always like that. It's always the situation where the business is faced with some competitive threat that they've recognized. And when it's driven top down, which is not always the case, but in a top down driven, they recognize a competitive threat, they respond in kind, but generally they don't know what to do or how to do it. How do we instill this change? How do we drive things forward? So in this company in particular, what we did was we said, okay, we're going to look at, how does marketing digitally transform? How do we change and be something different than we are today? And what does that look like? What would that look like? And so we went through an exercise where we defined, what does it look like if we are a digital business as opposed to what we are today, which was more traditional. They would send flyers in the mail and have events and things like that for their B2B side, and the business B2C side. It was really the stuff that you would experience from Comcast or Verizon or, Windstream or any company that you're, that's local to you. And that's how they operated. And they did not try to engage them in what we call digital watering holes. And so the part of the strategy was, we have to start thinking about how to engage customers in their digital watering holes. We know that they're online. And so we looked at the vision and worked our way backwards from that vision and said, okay, this is where we want to go. what has to happen in order for us to do that? And so we analyzed their capabilities. What are they able to do? What does that look like for them? And then worked into that and drilled into that at each level. So for example, in that environment, we recognized lead management was a problem. So how do they get somebody that fills out a form on their website all the way to sales as quickly as humanly possible when they indicate through their digital body language that they're ready to engage with sales. So we created an entire process, structure, and education plan for them to implement in the technology to enable that to happen quickly, to monitor digital behavior. We bought technologies to do that. We trained people how to use it. So it was multifaceted. A number of things had to change.
And Kobe, what was in the plan that helped them with adaptation around recognizing what was blocking them?
Yeah, so it's the adaptation part, again, it was in this client in particular was sort of forced, but they had to adapt because the CEO said we're changing. So, but we did have to work towards what's going to look different. How is this going to look different? And when we looked at what was going to make them successful, what it was assigning accountability, clear, someone is accountable for this task. So let's pick lead management apart for a second. In this case, we said, okay, this person's responsible for lead management. So we had what we referred to as a single throat to choke. If it doesn't work, if it fails, if it breaks, whatever, this person is accountable. So we assigned accountability. And in HR consulting, I learned and probably overlearned that joint accountability is no accountability. So
I just want to say for all of you people who have to work on joint projects, whether you're in school or whether you're in the workplace, it's still true. Joint accountability is no accountability.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. And we encourage our clients to pick one person, not two, not three, not a group of people that are going to lead this charge. We need one person to say that. And I really encourage that. And so adapting to that kind of environment, especially when you're in a hyper collaborative work environment, which they were, and they were hierarchical.
Yeah.
I always stumble over that word. But they were very much like that. And they were dependent on senior executives saying, it's okay to make that decision. And we needed to push that power down in the business. And so we needed our executives to start saying, it's okay to make those decisions. It's okay to fail. It's okay to make mistakes. And that wasn't the culture that they had. So it involved a culture shift also, but it was constantly being in front of them, constantly sending out that message and conveying that message and supporting. If you make a mistake, it's okay. We'll live. We're not going to die.
Yeah, you've been working with them, what, 3-4 years now?
About 3.5 years.
3.5 years. And would they say that the change is worth it? I mean,
oh, yes, absolutely.
What does it look like?
Well, what's super fun about it, so the accountability and then aligning with stakeholders. So we leveraged the IT group. We leveraged a whole bunch of different groups to make sure that we were aligned to make the change happen that had to happen. And then we looked at skills. That's the education bit. We looked at the skill sets of the people that they had and said, here where we have some gaps, and here is where we have opportunity. And so we did some development. We, in some cases, hired people. In some cases, we had to outsource skill sets if they didn't have them internally. And then we had to build that communication plan. And I was just sort of speaking to that constant communication is so critical in change. It just does not work if it's not, and if it's top down, it needs to be that it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to fail. That these things are okay. If it's a bottom up or mid up change that's being driven, the communication element of it is, in my opinion, even more important, because it becomes something that is, we have to show our successes.
Yeah, you need to influence, because you don't have a direct reporting structure that says, this will happen. So anyway.
So to answer your question, Debbie, the last part of it was establishing those KPIs or metrics that we measured to say that this initiative was successful. Like, what does that look like? And so we defined that at the beginning and said, here's where we want to be. What's that going to look like? When we've done these things, then we know we've been successful. And we wanted it woven into the fabric of the company because the company had to change. And the awesome thing that I still love to this day is, and it sounds simple and small, but they have this massive event that they host every year, that they spend literally millions of dollars to host this event. And for the 30 to 60 days prior to the event, they all hands on deck, all sales, all services, all marketing, everybody is driving towards hitting the registration number for this, that they want for this event. And we created new processes. We implemented and automated these processes, and we educated everybody in sales, services, and marketing and IT, they had to build it, on how this process was going to be different, how it was going to work, and how we were going to do this. And by doing that, we went from a 37 days average down to 3 days to hit that registration number.
Yeah.
34 days of productivity gained across the company.
Yeah.
It's almost impossible to quantify the millions and millions of dollars that they saved as a result of adopting a change in a process that they have been doing for years. And that's just a simple, tiny little sliver of the overarching work. But we digitized, and that was the point. The effort was digitize how we do business. And that was one process that was highly manual that we digitized and made it automated.
Okay, so Kobe, that's a great story. And again, it's ongoing. And this represents a change story where the CEO down, and then our role was driven through marketing to see where and how we needed to help them drive change and also adopt change. A lot of times when we go into companies, it is about some level of transformation, because quite frankly, when you start using technology, it does change things. It changes, things and how you actually run your business. And so, whether it's just within marketing or whether it's within marketing and the stakeholders, the change agent toolkit absolutely positively works. So Paul, tell us a little bit about your experience and some practical examples in change.
Yeah, I remember when we were first telling our sellers that they needed to change the way they were engaging with customers. And marketing came in with this new plan. And so sometimes just information.
Are you talking when you were at Microsoft?
Absolutely. Yeah. We were telling them that cold calling was dead and that they needed to leverage this tool, LinkedIn, to start engaging with their customers because their customers were all moving online to get their information. And I don't know if any of you are in a marketing organization, but that's separate from sales. But oftentimes those cool ideas from marketing go over like a lead balloon within the sales group. And so when we were telling them they needed to stop doing the way they had been selling and start going online and posting content and engaging with customers there, we just got this kind of arms folded and kind of leaned back, kind of, are you crazy? And so information was not enough to drive the change. But a few people adopted it. And after 6 months, we had the data. And it was that sellers who were becoming social sellers on LinkedIn had 3 times as much opportunity revenue as sellers in their organization who were not using this new program. And that was the motivation. As soon as we came with the numbers, boom, we got 90% adoption within 3 months. And so that's a really stark example of motivation.
So let's talk about the little change, right? Let's talk about, if you think about the folks who are on the phone right now, both the professionals and the students, and you think about change from a marketing perspective, what is different about change? Because, businesses have always talked about change, but through the marketing lens, what is different about change today? Let's start with Paul.
I think it's just happening faster than it's ever happened before. I think micro changes all the time. I remember one of my favorite bosses early on said to me, or told me the story where someone asked him, how do I keep up with the marketing profession? It's changing so fast. And he said, you got to start reading marketing books. And they said, oh, I'm way too busy in my workday to read a book. And he said, oh, I'm not suggesting that you read during your workday. I'm suggesting that you read after work. And they said, oh, the last thing I want to do after work is read a book about marketing. And he said, I'm not suggesting that you read something in your free time that you don't want to read, but if you don't enjoy reading about marketing, you might be in the wrong profession. And so for me, the answer to your question is you have to be excited and passionate about it, and you have to keep learning, constantly learning.
So I just want to bring together a couple of threads that we've all already mentioned. You know, we see today's chief marketing officer really having three really big challenges: digital transformation, whether that is specific only to marketing or as being part of a larger digital transformation initiative. And probably less than 25% of companies would rate their digital transformation journey as successful up to this point, and that's in all size companies. We also see the CMO challenged with revenue, you know, especially in the B2B world. CMOs have been challenged with being able to produce credible revenue. 85% of CMOs report feeling very pressured to show revenue results, yet less than a third actually report any kind of revenue results. That continues to be a big element for them. And then the final element is this whole notion of customer centricity. I mean, the customer is absolutely positively in control of their journey, and you're not going to make them take it faster. They know more about you than probably most of your salespeople know just by doing research, and they're one swipe away from your competitor's website. So quite often when we come into a marketing organization, it is to help with digital transformation, customer centricity, and also getting to revenue. And we do that with, of course, people, process, and technology, because technology is a huge role in that. So Colby, maybe you could talk for a few minutes about, you know, how has technology changed marketing and marketing's relationship to change?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and it's really important, especially if for those of you that are professionals, and those actually that are not. If you have not looked at Scott Brinker's MarTech super graphic, I would encourage you to do that and look at Chief MarTech and see what that looks like. He has a progression of it and has been doing it for several years, where what he's doing is monitoring the technology in our space, and the tech, I think it was even 5 years ago, Deb, correct me if I'm wrong, but the tech 5 years ago available to marketers was somewhere around 300 or 400.
Yeah, it's about 300, yeah.
Yeah, and it's now over 8,000 different technologies that are available to marketers, that are sold to marketers. In fact, the research right now shows that the marketers spend, the marketing CMO spend on technology is 3.4% of the total spend in the business, and for an IT leader, it's 3.2%. We are now spending more on technology than we ever have in the past, and we have surpassed IT, which is where you would expect the tech spend to be.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting that that's what's happening. But as a result of that technology spend and purchasing, a lot of companies are buying, I will say a lot of companies are buying technology in search of a purpose because it looks cool and it looks like it's a fun thing, rather than having a purpose and buying a technology. And every tech that you implement, it creates some additional change because it provides you with some other insight or information that you didn't already have. And then the question is, what do I do with that information? So if you're using information on, or using a technology that does social scanning and that's looking to see what people are saying about your brand or your company, what do you do with that information? How are you going to handle that? Whose job's going to change in order to manage or respond to the market shift that has happened because you now know what people are saying about your brand? Do you work with brand? What's that look like? And how is that collaboration structure? How frequently do you have to look at it? So who owns those things? A lot of people's jobs are shifting and changing as a result of it. So I think that the technology piece of it is it's a catalyst for change. I know it was for me in my personal career. It was a catalyst, 13, 14, 15 years ago when Eloqua and when Marketo and Eloqua really came to the market and were made accessible to everyone. Those are marketing automation platforms, if you're not familiar, and you can use them to track digital behavior on your website and also to as email deliverability tools. So and we can track people's every single thing that they do as it relates to that technology on landing pages and via email. So that tech was extremely disruptive to the market, and it changed everything. And then all of this expansion has happened. But the reason that I think tech has gotten to the place where it is, and I know, Deb, you do a lot of public speaking on this topic, so feel free to chime in here, but I think the reason that it has caused such a significant shift is we need new skill sets, and we need new roles in marketing to be able to manage and analyze the data, where BA or business analysts may have historically sat outside of marketing. We didn't need them because we didn't have data to analyze and to look.
That's absolutely positively true. And so I want to talk for a few minutes about career advice for those of you who are in school and thinking about, the careers that you actually would like to have. For the last 10 years, I've taught one class at the College of William and Mary, and I teach there because they can't get modern marketing really into their curriculum. So you're lucky to be in a school who is addressing this, because very, very few schools do. Most don't teach past the 4 Ps. And I'm going to read something that I just wrote this morning. It's part of the forward for my next my next book that's coming out. This is what I said about marketing. I said, it's time to reimagine, redefine, and then reinvent the role of B2B marketing. It's time to eradicate the legacy ideas, perceptions, roles, and siloed structures that hold back the potential of marketing. It's time to recognize the power of the customer and marketing's role in a new kind of customer relationship. It's time to embrace a new world transformed by technology, in which marketing is no longer the pens and mugs department. It's time for marketing to step up, assume a key leadership role for the future, and move from the back room to the boardroom. So when we think about the future of marketing, those are the kinds of things that we think about. So please, if you guys have questions, put them in the chat window. We will respond in writing if we run out of time. So whatever question you have, we will absolutely positively respond to. But Paul, if you could give, if you were giving advice to college graduates about what they needed to know about marketing, especially in terms of change, what would you say? What advice would you give?
I would say the job you'll have in 5 years probably hasn't been invented yet in marketing.
Maybe 3 years.
And the products,
maybe
yeah,
2 years.
Yeah. And the products that you're going to be marketing probably don't exist yet either. And so rather than trying to predict what technologies to learn, what tools to use, just get good at learning and just constantly be curious and adopt and try new things. You've got to test, try, learn, just that whole marketing learning loop in order to stay abreast and to stay relevant with your skills.
I think that's true, especially in B2B. We've just forgotten how to experiment. B2C, you have a whole lot more experimentation. So I would say that that's completely true. Kobe, what career advice would you have for folks graduating?
Yeah, so the one thing, I mean, I went a completely different way. My degree's in psychology, and I thought that's what I was going to do. And here I am as a marketer 20 some years later. I think the advice that I would give is to be open to change, to be open to the constant consumer dynamic shift, because that is what's happening. And I think it's really important that we as individuals and marketers are to be constantly learning. Paul mentioned the book and the why do I have to read this book thing. Knowing where the resources are. Content Marketing Institute, phenomenal resource for understanding content marketing. Marketing profs, understanding where you can get this information, where you can get it for free. Most current stuff, many of us contribute to that are on the forefront of the industry and creating a digital customer relationship. But I think that the acceptance of change, and as many of you indicated, you are you are a part of a change agent in the business. For those of you that are, I think one of the key things that for me that I've learned and that I help and coach my clients with, individual clients, individual people around are really two things. And that's uncovering what the resistance to change is and understanding the personal and practical side of that. And as a student, when you go into it, if you're resistant, step back.
Kobe?
Who's Colby?
Yep. I think we lost her, but I think what she was going to say, because Kobe and I have one mind and two mouths, it feels like sometimes. She's talking about be always looking for, are you a change resistor or are you a change agent? And again, change doesn't mean just, jumping up and just doing something just to be different. Oh, there you are, Kobe. Go ahead. We lost you for a second there. Oh, and she's gone again. And so what it means is always being agile, always asking the question, will this make what I do better? Is this the way to improve? What kind of results will I be able to drive now, right? And as a professional, especially in the marketing career, you have to be constantly asking those questions of yourself and also of the managers, the directors, and the VPs that you're working with as well. And it's even your job to be a change agent, perhaps not leading the change, but helping to influence the change. So Paul was talking about, and Colby was talking about communication plans, and especially how powerful they are if you don't have this thing coming from the top down. And peer-to-peer influence is one of the most powerful things that you can do to affect change. And Paul gave the example of the salesperson, and all salespeople are like 4-year-olds. And what that means is, if one 4-year-old has a toy and they play with it for 5 seconds, they throw it down, they walk away, they don't want it anymore. Here comes another 4-year-old, they pick it up, and all of a sudden the first 4-year-old wants it back, right? So that peer-to-peer influence it can be very, very powerful. And when you take a look at a communication plan, it's not just top-down communication, it's also how you put in motion that peer-to-peer communication as well, okay?
The other thing I want to mention is as a change agent, and I apologize, I got kicked out of Zoom for a second, so I apologize for that, my disappearing act, but that one of the things that I see very often as either with the professionals that I work with are being okay being a disruptor. And to be the person that drives change in a business, you really have to be confident and comfortable that you can shoulder and weather the storm, because you will come up against resistance. You will have people that say, I'm not doing that. You will have people say, why would I even bother? That's going to take more time. I don't have time for that. You'll get it everywhere. And you will feel like you need to have all the answers right then. But you don't actually need to have all of the answers right then. What you need to have an answer for is why. Why are we doing this? Why is this important to the business? That's the part that needs to be answered right away. We need to do this because of this. But when we work with our clients, really understanding as a professional, helping them understand, why is that person resisting? Back to that personal and practical need. Why are they resisting? And then building those, you as a professional, building those strategic working relationships to help you build your quorum of people to influence change. And that's what you really need to do as a professional, is build that group. And to be successful in driving change, bringing people along with you and being inclusive rather than exclusive is really, really important.
And if I could say one thing that I think is the hallmark of today's modern marketer, whether you're B2E or whether you're B2C or whether you're B2B, is this ability to create cross-functional relationships. Marketing is no longer in a siloed tower. Marketing is really becoming a company-wide capability. And because of that, you have to work with IT, you have to work with sales, you have to work with service. You can't just go off in your ivory tower and just do things. So more and more, we're seeing CMOs and marketing leaders who have other things in their background, not just marketing. I recently, for my book, interviewed 26 executives. Over half of them did not even have degrees in marketing. They had degrees in IT, they had degrees in sales, they had degree in sciences, right? So that bringing that different perspective into marketing is one of the things that we're finding also helps change. And I was taking a look at what Nicole had put up about the 7 Ps: product, price, place, promotion, people, process, and physical evidence. And again, they've taken the 4 Ps and they have expanded those to the 7 Ps now, right? Which I think that they absolutely positively should. But you know, your ability to communicate, your ability to influence, and your ability to collaborate will stand you very well going into a marketing career. Okay. So we have about 3 minutes left. Again, if you have questions, put them in the chat window. Paul, what are your final thoughts about change for marketers?
I think some of the best advice I got was from a venture capitalist who says, I'm not interested in people who are passionate about solutions. I'm interested in people who are passionate about problems. And so in your career, you do not have to be a know-it-all to be successful, but you do have to be a learn-it-all.
Oh, I love that, Paul. I love that. Colby, final thoughts?
Yeah, I think Paul said it at the beginning of the session, and I love it and I live by it. And it was learn to like change or learn to like irrelevance even less. and that absolutely is true, not just in the business context. We all know the Blockbuster story and, you know, what's happening right now with JCPenney and Neiman Marcus and other, you know, retail environments. They're dying because they failed to adapt, but we are, as individuals, as marketers, we can become dinosaurs very quickly, which is why I suggested that, you know, Content Marketing Institute and marketing profs staying ahead of it and staying knowledgeable about our industry and what's happening, and go to those conferences that are led not by the tech vendors, frankly, but the ones that are Content Marketing Institute or MACON, which is Marketing a Artificial Intelligence Conference that's happening now, and really staying ahead of it and learning and continuously educating yourself on what's ahead of you and what other people are doing are really the best ways, I think, to enable and stabilize your career in marketing long term.
Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. You know, we could teach a whole class just on change management. We have enough content, we have enough stories. And all I want to say is, don't let it happen to you. You know, be a part of it. It'll feel a whole lot better. Whether you're at the level to be a peer influencer, whether you're thinking about how this change impacts you personally, or whether you think about how this particular change affects what you do in your job, or whether you're the person leading the change. Just remember, it is, I don't know how to put it, but change is it's a thing. It's a thing that you need to understand, and it's a thing that you need to proactively manage every single day. So with that, Colby, thank you. Paul, thank you so much for being with us today. And we had a pleasure being with everybody, and we hope you have great success in your careers and in your jobs. So thank you.
Great. I have one closing statement from Stephanie. Be sure to visit integrate.wvu.edu for upcoming sessions, recordings of previous episodes, including this one, and to subscribe to receive updates.
Done in a great radio voice, Paul. Thank you. Everyone have a great day.
Thanks. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.